Hey, hello. Everybody can hear me. This is the last panel of the day. And we are going to have Steve Ceverny and Dan Heyman from Quorum. Nice chair, Dan. From Italy, right?
Thank you. Exactly. Yeah.
Hi, Steve. How are you? Can you hear us well? I think they are connecting to audio. Steve, can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, Max.
All right. Okay. And yeah, thanks a lot for joining. This is the last panel of the day. I would say we started at 9 with Joe, and we had a really great panel on enterprises, on regulation, decentralized finance. We just had the foundation talking about ETH 2.0. And yeah, it has been a great day. And sorry if I look tired. I've been speaking all day, but really appreciate to have you doing this panel at the end. We are working with both of you in a different way, but ConsenSys and Kaleido have been supporting this event all day. As I mentioned, we had more than 370 people registering. We had over 100 people tuning in for each session during the day. I think it's 6:30 now. It's a bit in the traffic, but we have people on the Facebook Live as well, and I will relay the questions. So yeah, before let me introduce the two people that we have here. I will start with Steve, CEO and founder of Kaleido. I will explain you what Kaleido is. At Atato, we are using Kaleido for most of the projects that we are building here. And Daniel Heyman from ConsenSys, lead protocol at Quorum, and we'll discuss about this as well. Many Thai companies are now going to use Quorum, and we had some requests about Quorum, so we're happy to discuss about it. So I will monitor the Q&A and the chat as well on Facebook. I will let you do your presentation, and then after we can go ahead for some questions, if it's okay with you. Shall we start with Steve, if it's okay with you?
Good. Thank you.
All right.
Just going to pull up the presentation now. Does it look good, Max?
It's all perfect. Yeah. We hear you well, and we see the presentation well. So the floor is yours.
Well, good morning from the East Coast of the U.S. and thank you all for hanging on. I'm excited to have this conversation with Max and Dan as well, and you and all your questions. I've got three observations about where the adoption of enterprise blockchain is today that I want to talk a little bit about in this session. But before I do that, just a little bit on myself. My background's in sort of core enterprise systems, back office, etc. I've been in the blockchain space for 5 years, hard to believe. And my co-founders and I started Kaleido in 2017. And that's a little bit about me. Now a little bit about Kaleido. If you're not familiar with our platform, we started Kaleido with a pretty simple concept in mind. We wanted to take the blockchain solutions that we saw customers building, not just the blockchain technology itself, the entire solution. We saw customers falling into the same ditches over and over again on this journey to get these multi-party business networks built in a truly disruptive and digital way. We wanted to help make that radically simple, and we wanted to have a focus for enterprise from day one. So what that means is we've been focusing on the idea of a consortium or a group of companies and the sort of tools and capabilities that you need to bootstrap a network, to scale it, to grow it, and to, importantly, to harden it as you get into production. And so we built this platform. If you think about almost like at AWS itself, how there's a catalog of services that are plug and play, they work together. There are common things about them, but they each solve a unique problem. So sometimes people ask us, hey, are you a blockchain as a service? Are you a node as a service? Well, I say, well, that's a feature that we have on the platform. But what we see is business networks need a whole set of other capabilities and technologies, and that we need those to work together. Now, no two projects are alike. However, there is a decent amount of overlap. So you have the choice on our sort of born in the cloud platform to select the technologies you want and to get them to work together. We're working with great partners like Atato and ConsenSys, but we fundamentally have built this as a SaaS, so sort of a next-gen implementation. These are next-gen projects, so you want to be on the latest and greatest. You're thinking about a 20-year time horizon for these sorts of systems that you're building. We've partnered with AWS and Azure. We run natively across regions around the world. You can also run hybrid. And we work with the greatest open source technologies, and we make those easy for you to deploy and stand up on our platform. And so the bottom line benefit is you can build out your solution faster. There are hundreds of APIs available to you. This means your time to value is reduced significantly, and that means your build costs. But then as you look at running, operating, growing, scaling, we've solved a lot of those day 3, day 4, day 5 type problems on the platform. And so you can streamline how you run and operate as well. Okay, so that was the quick overview. Now I want to jump into those 3 observations that I was mentioning a few minutes ago. Let's take a step back and think about digital transformation for a minute. I believe this is the theme of this decade in enterprise IT. Here's a quote from a client that we work with, a group of some of the largest insurance companies in the US. And this person said, because of COVID, they've seen their digital transformation roadmap accelerate by 10 years. 10 years. So the amount of pressure that companies feel to really go digital, and the low-hanging fruit I think we've gotten to in the industry over the years. Now we're talking about harder problems, more interesting challenges. If we look at digital transformation, you could observe that we've been on this journey going from the front office to the back office. BPM is a term that many of us know quite well from the middleware days. Things like a mortgage loan origination and that whole long-running process, maybe lower volume but high value, and then we moved into robotic process automation, or RPA. We hear a lot about that in the middle office, where it's maybe more mundane tasks that are higher value that we're trying to automate. But what we see in this decade is in the back office, blockchain being applied to both high volume and high value type of processes that weren't touched to date because, one, they're running on legacy systems, and 2, there are these data silos all over the place where multiple organizations run this process that spans across them. And that's where blockchain comes in and is a game-changing technology. If you just look at COVID itself, we had a version of this slide. We could completely redraw it in this sort of COVID season, hopefully, that we're going through around the world. But there are many other examples that are more evergreen. The idea that there is a fundamental lack of transparency and trust across our legacy systems, how our supply chains have been built up over a series of decades, and what that means for retailers who are trying to guarantee that drugs are genuine, who are trying to track where items are, track and trace. If we look at risk and inefficiency all through the financial systems, just mentioned the insurance industry, the healthcare industry, all major industries, we see sort of these same fundamental problems. And COVID's exposed just how brittle our supply chains are, and just how, much or lack thereof our legacy systems are able or not able to scale to meet the demands that come. And so blockchain is the killer technology. I know we are all here because we know that and already, but think about the part of the problem that blockchain is helping solve, this larger digital transformation problem, the specific hard, sticky problems in the back office that are really high value, but haven't been solved yet. Bring in a shared ledger, a distributed ledger type technology, automate things on smart contracts, and decentralize, but share equally. Important is that we're sharing amongst these data silos, and that allows us to approach problems more in a more efficient manner. Okay, so while these back office type systems and processes, while blockchain is really a key ingredient, we sometimes think of it as the beating heart of these digital business networks. It alone can't solve the problem. Business networks need a whole set of technologies, and what we are seeing is perhaps 5% of the solution is the blockchain layer itself, and we're seeing clients that really get stuck once you're beyond the blockchain layer itself, get stuck in a whole set of off-chain technologies that run alongside, below, on top of the blockchain network. How to identities that exist in legacy systems, an LDAP system or Active Directory, how does that relate to an identity on the blockchain, and so on. Many problems that exist. In fact, a typical project has as many as 40 components. So think about all those technologies that need to come together in order to actually get your system live. And so what we can do is actually start to realize that these systems have all the same layers in them that our other systems have. There's a data layer. Some of that data goes on chain, but a lot of it's not going to go on chain, right? So how do off-chain data storage and systems work with what's going on chain? Within the transaction layer, privacy is such a huge topic, and I'm sure that's come up a number of times today, and that's doubly true in a shared system or a multi-party system where you want the benefits and efficiency of sharing, but you don't want to sacrifice the privacy that you need to operate your business. Up in the middleware layer, where there's we live in a data-rich world, and there are streams of data that exist in other systems. They need to get onto the platform that you want to build. So in a multi-party, you're talking B2B, so you need to be able to integrate and to collaborate within the system as well, but also bringing data outside of the system and in. And then finally, at the application layer, you see new existing constructs where you want to build apps with technologies that are now common, like Node.js, et cetera. and there's the stacks that you're familiar to using to build those. But you want to integrate into that. You want to infuse into these applications things like digital assets and tokens, et cetera, that are new, that really make your application special. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the third observation, really specific to this point in time. No more POCs. You know, the pressure is really on to get into production. And we were saying this before COVID really took hold, but it's been very dramatic to see, you know, the shift that's happened, the amount of pressure, I've used that word a couple times, that a lot of our clients are having around getting a project live. And this could be a project that's been running for several years, but it's not in full production yet. We've seen a number of those sorts of projects really looking at 2021 saying, we have to get this system live. Martha Bennett, who's the lead for blockchain at Forrester, there's a quote from her here. You know, the reality is the gap between a successful pilot and production is quite substantial. So let's think about this and talk about this for a minute. When we launched Kaleido, we actually built this slide from the learnings that we had already in the blockchain space, and it's as true today as it was then. We think about the 3 hills to take to really get your business network live. The proof of concept curve, where you're really trying to digest all the new technologies. Now there are great platforms and solutions out there like Kaleido that can really accelerate that. You get into a pilot stage, and then you're really thinking about shared IT for the first time. Okay, governance, how is this network going to run over time? How are we going to coordinate changes to, you know, things like smart contracts on an ongoing basis? Distributed ownership. We're on a journey to decentralization, so what does that look like over time? And then going into production, thinking about scaling the network. Okay, well, pilot had 5 members in it. Now we need to get to 500, right? How do those next orders of magnitude, you know, really happen on the network? You know, how many 9s of uptime do you need? What does that mean for a multi-party system? So many traditional, you know, the traditional production problems like high availability, disaster recovery, sort of fusing that together with a multi-party system and new forms of governance. And you have significant challenges that you need to work through to get into production. So it's no wonder that, you know, especially some of the earlier projects have, you know, taken some amount of time to really take that final hill and get into production. I will say that on Kaleido, we have the opportunity and the pleasure to serve many leading companies around the world in conjunction with our partners who are operating their production networks on Kaleido. We haven't forgotten about the enterprise grade sort of things that you need along the way. You know, we're ISO and now SOC 2 certified, things like key management, plugging into enterprise identity systems, 24/7 support, all the traditional things you need for a production system like disaster recovery, business continuity. These things might not be on your mind at the outset, but they can become huge blockers if you haven't addressed them and you're thinking and now you're really wanting to get into production. Okay, so I'm going to leave it here, but before I do, just going to take a couple more minutes for honorable mentions that we didn't really have time to go through in more detail today, but I want to throw them out there in case, you know, maybe we want to talk about them in the question and answer, for example. Decentralization is a journey. I mentioned that earlier in the presentation. The reality is that the multi-party aspect of what enterprises are trying to do is so different from the hundreds of other systems they're running today that it's a journey to get to where you want to get to. Ultimately, there are trade-offs involved. There's a process to get there. And so making practical decisions and understanding that things can evolve over time is going to be important. Governance, that's a deep topic. It's probably come up throughout the day, but it's something that really shouldn't be neglected. It's one of those things that can definitely cause. We've seen consortium. We probably all have that have gridlocked. I certainly have, because the governance process was just ineffective. Member onboarding, that day 3, day 5 type problem is. That it's great to have a way to do that. Something with Kaleido, a few clicks can get the new technology on. But think ahead about being gated by the fact that new member may need to integrate to legacy back office type systems before they're fully engaged and active on the network. And then finally, I'll say, tokens, the killer blockchain use case, but in the enterprise space, often what we mean when we say tokens are digital assets. There's an asset, and I'll use sort of the air quotes, there's an asset in basically every enterprise use case. And so tokens become a really powerful aspect to the project that can either fuel the core use case or can add a tremendous amount of value on top of that core use case. So that's something you should really be thinking about, talking with your partners who are along the journey with you, who are helping, and seeing how you can leverage tokens along the way. Okay, so with that, just to wrap up and say that at Kaleido, we are here to help make blockchain simple again for you. You can connect with me directly or through partners like Atato there in Thailand. If you want to see a demo, unfortunately, I don't have time to do that as well today, but we're always happy to have a conversation and take you through the platform. So with that, I'll turn it back to Max and over to my friend and partner Dan with ConsenSys.
Thanks a lot, Steve. I really appreciate your presentation. Always straight to the point and very clear. Thanks a lot. And, as a user and a partner of Kaleido, every time we make a demo of your product, there is this wow effect. That it's very simple. People get it. For enterprises who want to set up a private blockchain, they just don't imagine that it could be that simple. So that's why your product is successful. And I will just ask a couple of questions that we had on the chat before going over to Dan, and after we can continue the Q&A. But the first one, and thank you, Steve. Can I use Kaleido to deploy my own blockchain application and smart contracts, or do you provide your own? I think straight answer.
Yeah, great question. So what we provide is essentially subscription infrastructure. And so we give you a bunch of building blocks, almost like Legos, and the APIs around those. The application that you want to build is specific to your business problem. And so that's unique, a code that you write yourself. You write your own apps. And we give you straightforward ways to connect your application into the smart contracts that you build. So that's not always straightforward, by the way. So your application developers aren't used to speaking JSON RPC and speaking over new protocols. We built technologies to give you, RESTful APIs, for example, back, and something they're comfortable building with. So there are a lot of Legos that are available for you to build with. But the business logic is really unique to the solution that you want to build. And so that's something that you, or by extension, your partners would build. And Kaleido gives you the subscription infrastructure that's, enterprise grade to accelerate in doing that.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks a lot, Steve, for your question. I would just go over for one interesting one. Are there any company in Thailand currently using Kaleido? what's the feedback on using it. I think this one we can reply as well. Since Closed Cloud is at Australia, are there any problem?
Well, Max, I don't know if you want to just maybe start the answer to the question there.
Yeah, I mean, the clients we are working together, sure, the experience is great. The feedback is, as I mentioned before, very positive. They really appreciate the UI, the fact that it is very easy for them to understand, for their team as well, which are not actually used to blockchain, or it's a new technology for them. They can use Kaleido in a simple click. So this is really, as a partner, what we like and what our clients like. And yes, there is 2 clients that are using Kaleido today, actually large enterprises.
Thanks, Max. And so I would just add to that. You know, Kaleido runs on Azure and AWS, so it's some major public cloud vendors. We are always adding new regions, so around the world. So there are some in additional regions in Asia that we're looking at expanding to. For example, Singapore is you know, towards the top of the list on our roadmap. So we could be coming to a cloud closer to you. I will say that you know, a lot of blockchain systems, the milliseconds of latency, because Australia was specifically mentioned in the question, you know, just because of the nature of blockchain systems themselves, it's not a blocker. We don't see those milliseconds being a blocker in the overall applications that are being built. So just add those thoughts in there. And one final thought is Kaleido is also hybrid. We do recommend clients, if at all possible, through your company and through the business network you're working on, to start in the cloud. Almost every company that we've seen makes that choice just to go faster. But we understand, specific maybe to your industry, you may have a requirement or a need to run on premise or on a private cloud. And so Kaleido actually does have what we call private stack. It's the ability to run hybrid. And that's where you download, you start on the Kaleido console, but you select that you don't want to run in one of the available regions, you want to set up your own. And we give you a set of software to download, and still connects in case the other members of the network are running on the public cloud. You can connect to them without any additional configuration on your side. We've built in, you know, security, enterprise-grade security, you know, firewalls, and a network bridge to make that really easy. But that is an option if it's necessary.
Okay, but thanks a lot for your reply, Steve. And indeed, when we have these questions, we know how to reply as well. I will go over to Dan and maybe a couple of questions at the end for both of you, if it's all right. And thanks a lot, Steve, for your presentation again. And hi, Dan, can you hear me well? And
yes.
Yeah, I think
perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. And just for your information, we here in Thailand, there is some, I would say, large institutions which are starting to use Quorum. So we had some interest here in Thailand for specific companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Max, for inviting me. Tato for organizing this event. The lineup looks great, and I've heard some great feedback on the event already. Steve, it's always a pleasure to be on the proverbial stage with you. We work closely together, and so it's always great to connect. So just a little bit of background. My name is Daniel. My email is here. My Twitter is here. Feel free to reach out to me if you have additional questions that we don't get to cover in this session. I lead the protocol engineering team at ConsenSys, and so I largely focus on strategy, operations, and go-to-market, but the protocol team focuses entirely on that blockchain layer that Steve was talking about in his previous presentation. So there's a lot of layers that go into a successful blockchain application, but at the core of everything is the blockchain layer, and that's what our team specializes in, what we focus on. And it comes down to sort of a few different technologies. So there's Hyperledger Besu, which is an Ethereum mainnet client. That means you can use it to connect to public Ethereum. You can then also customize it for enterprise deployments on Kaleido or elsewhere. And that's actually with the recent announcements and what I'll talk about today is that's being integrated into ConsenSys Quorum. And then there's also Teku, which I just want to mention very briefly in case anyone's interested in that later. It's our Ethereum 2.0 client. So many of you might know that Ethereum is planning a major upgrade to its core protocols, moving from a proof of work consensus mechanism to a proof of stake consensus mechanism. That is not the topic of today's presentation, but ConsenSys and the protocols team are heavily involved in that. Teku is one of the leading clients in that. And if anyone has questions on that front, I'm also happy to talk. What I'm going to focus on pretty much for the rest of this presentation is ConsenSys Quorum. As Max said, increasingly people are using ConsenSys Quorum for their production-grade blockchain applications. There have been a number of pretty exciting and important changes in how ConsenSys Quorum works, what the roadmap is, and so forth over the last few months. And so I'll talk through those. I'll talk through some of the use cases we're seeing. I'll talk through why we think ConsenSys Quorum is the sort of no-brainer choice for enterprise blockchain applications. And then, as Mike said, we'll have time for questions. So very quickly, for those who don't live and breathe in the space on a day-to-day basis like I do, in August, JP Morgan and ConsenSys announced a multifaceted partnership. And the bit that's most relevant to this presentation is ConsenSys took over responsibility for the Quorum code base. And so Quorum is the enterprise Ethereum client that JP Morgan has built for a large number of years. So they started working on it, I think unofficially even before 2016, officially, maybe as early as 2015, which in the history of Ethereum is remarkably early because Ethereum only launched in mainnet in 2014. And so JP Morgan, to their credit, were at the forefront of innovation and experimentation on how can we use this very exciting, powerful technology in the enterprise context. How can we take it from this potentially scary, potentially unclear, potentially adversarial public chain and get the benefits that the technology brings to put it in a controlled environment in private chains. So JP Morgan launched this in 2016. It's quickly become the most used enterprise Ethereum implementation out there. So we have hundreds of enterprises using it. There's dozens of production grade consortia that are live today on ConsenSys Quorum. JP Morgan themselves this week made another large announcement about doubling down their investments in blockchain with IIN, which has been rebranded as Link, and JPM Coin, which went live yesterday. And all of those are built on this Quorum technology. In parallel, my team at ConsenSys has built Hyperledger Besu, which we talked about a little bit. We launched it about a year ago, the V1. It's a mainnet Ethereum client. It also works with enterprise Ethereum. It's a little bit different than Quorum because it supports both the public and the private networks. And JP Morgan and ConsenSys started talking, and we realized that both clients have some major advantages. Both can learn from the other one significantly, and it didn't make sense to be building these two roadmaps in parallel. So we decided a few months ago to merge both efforts under the ConsenSys Quorum umbrella. So for moving forward, ConsenSys Quorum is the enterprise Ethereum bundle that ConsenSys supports, that we will be pushing forward, that we will be driving. ConsenSys Quorum does come today with two options. There's a Java-based option that is based on Hyperledger Besu, which is the client historically the protocol team has built. And then there's a Go-based option, which is based on Go Quorum, which is the client historically JP Morgan has built. Over the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to be working towards interoperability between these two. So I'll get into the roadmap in a little bit, but the main focus and the main outcome is bringing the best of both clients to the other one, making sure the lessons learned from one client gets implemented in the other one, and making sure the features that our users are demanding get built into both clients. The goal here is that you can then run either version of ConsenSys Quorum on the same network and be able to successfully move forward. So, quickly, that was a very rushed, high-level overview. I'm going to just dive a little deeper into what is ConsenSys Quorum and why we think this is a very exciting announcement, and then I'll get into how people are using it. So, before I do that, I wanted to speak to any existing Quorum users that might be in the audience. I think there's a few points that are really, really important to make clear. And so the first is ConsenSys is 100% committed to maintaining Quorum as an open source code base, developing new features, and ensuring that applications built on top of Quorum continue to be successful as part of ConsenSys Quorum. The Quorum dev team from JP Morgan will be working closely over the next year with the ConsenSys protocol teams on the roadmap, on support, on new feature development, on best practices. And ConsenSys is building out its own dedicated team to support both clients. Now, one of the exciting bits is our protocol team is already over 60 people. So that's 4 times bigger than what JP Morgan has building the core protocol. And so we have the capabilities to drive feature development, drive roadmap development at a different scale than JP Morgan was able to bring to the table. So we hope that's exciting news for existing users of ConsenSys Quorum. Now, a quick shameless plug, just because my team would be mad if I didn't do this. We are hiring at the protocol layer. So feel free to email me if you're interested or you have a colleague or know anyone who's interested. Both Golang, Java, and Rust skills. But that's my shameless plug. Back to the presentation. There's a couple other reasons we think existing Quorum users should be really excited. So I've mentioned already, we'll be merging the roadmaps for Quorum and Hyperledger Base. And this will enable us to bring the best elements of both implementations across. This should meaningfully benefit both users. And one consistent bit of feedback we've heard from the market on Quorum when it was run by JP Morgan is that while people really like the software, I think there was a little bit of concern that they weren't able to get their needs as users on the roadmap. And what I mean by this is JP Morgan was ultimately building Quorum for its own use cases. That's changed with this acquisition. We're building it for our customers' use cases and our users' use cases. So we really want to hear from you as users of Quorum, what you want to see on our roadmap, what's working for you, what's not. We take feedback very seriously, and we publish our roadmaps very regularly so that you can plan against it and influence it, and we want that input. Another thing we heard from the market on ConsenSys Quorum is that people wanted to take ConsenSys Quorum into production, but for some people, they were worried that there wasn't the enterprise-grade support. And so, if you build on Kaleido, as Steve said, that comes with enterprise support. So those users didn't have any issues. But there are a large number of users who build on Azure Blockchain Service or other, on-prem or using other go-to-market and sort of tooling, and they didn't have the enterprise-grade support. So with the acquisition, we're launching and announcing full coverage, enterprise-grade support, 24/7. If you need it, all geos are covered, SLAs tailored to your needs. And so we hope existing Quorum users will feel as excited about this deal as we are about this deal. So just continuing along, I'm going to speak to this very quickly because I think I don't want to get too much into the weeds. But just to be incredibly clear about what's inside ConsenSys Quorum to make sure there are no or limited confusion, you have choices on the Ethereum client. You can choose between Hyperledger Base and Go Quorum. You have choices of the transaction manager. You can choose between Orion and Icera. The good news is next month we'll be releasing a ConsenSys Quorum bundle that abstracts all this away. So you don't need to worry about all the choice set and the terms here. But I wanted to include this slide in the presentation so people can take away and look at it and ask questions if they want. All right, so why are we better together? I think this one I might have already made a bit clear, but it's worth hammering home. Enterprise Ethereum is the backbone of everything ConsenSys Quorum does, right? There's the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, there's the Ethereum community. It's very much community driven. And by bringing Quorum and Hyperledger Bases together, we can unify enterprises with Ethereum, unify the narrative, unify best practices, and make sure that the tooling, the applications, the implementations work across the entire ecosystem. It enables us to grow our strategic partnerships and our reach, and it enables us to just frankly ship more features. And so all of these will be really important. The truth is about ConsenSys Quorum that our strength comes in no small part from the Ethereum community. There are hundreds of thousands of developers who build on top of Ethereum, and by uniting under ConsenSys Quorum, we'll be able to ensure that the tools, applications, and software work interoperability across both clients. ConsenSys Quorum with Hyperledger Bases will also be mainnet compatible and supporting any use case that requires mainnet. That's in addition to the hundreds of large enterprises and large production use cases that are already using ConsenSys Quorum today across industry and use case. I can't really articulate this enough. For businesses who want to develop on blockchain, working with ConsenSys Quorum gives you access to this massive community and all the innovation the community has and all the optionality that this community brings in the future. So when I say optionality, what I mean is your use case today might be entirely private chain, but new use cases might come in the future that require mainnet or require bridging across chains or requiring new technical solutions. By staying close to the most innovative and robust community, you have that flexibility in your tech stack. And so we see a lot of enterprises choosing ConsenSys Quorum, not just because of the quality of the technology today, the quality of the partners, the quality of the use cases, but also just the pace of innovation that's happening. And so, you know, just like Steve, we also have a slide, a lot of similar people, the folks using ConsenSys Quorum. If we look at the top right of this slide, you'll see both Kaleido and Atato on here as sort of key partners. I think there's just a couple things to highlight on this slide, which is use cases exist across industry, you know, from luxury retail to financial services, from nonprofit use cases, central banks to high finance to supply chain. We have numerous successful implementations of production use cases running today, and these have a proven track record. We've developed patterns that make it quicker and easier to go to market, cheaper to go to market, faster to go to market, and more reliable when you're in production. I think it's important to note also with the acquisition of Quorum, ConsenSys is now making available its full enterprise stack on top of ConsenSys Quorum. So I don't have time to go over them all, but I'll just highlight a few of the available modules. And if you want to learn more, feel free to email me and we can schedule a deep dive. The first one to highlight is the Orchestrate feature, which came out of direct customer work to abstract away the complexity of taking blockchain use cases to production. We found in certain implementations, it simplifies time to market by as much as 70% because it implements in a productized way the components that every blockchain needs in production. So it's things like nonce management, event handling, transaction listening, and so forth. The second one I just want to flag is Codify Assets, which is another popular one. We completely agree with what Steve said. Pretty much every high-value blockchain use case has a digital asset in one form or another, and Codify Asset enables enterprises to leverage the token standards built into Ethereum very easily for all your needs. There are others, you know, workflow, like the name suggests, provides standard business process capabilities on Ethereum. There's a lot of value built into these, but I just wanted to highlight those. Max, how much more time do I have?
You can go ahead on the roadmap, and then after we'll go some. Okay. There is interesting questions on the Q&A, so go ahead.
Perfect. So here's just a couple slides on the ConsenSys Quorum roadmap. We publish this and update this regularly. One of the key first steps that we'll be focusing for the next 12 months is driving interoperability between the Java-based version and the Go-based version of the client. And so when we say interoperability, there's a few main things that need to happen. At the protocol layer specifically, we need the consensus mechanism, BFT, a BFT-based consensus mechanism to work across both clients. That's really exciting because it comes with BFT optimization, decreasing the message sizes, minimizing the number of empty blocks. These are all sort of technical details we can drill into, but the upshot is lower latency, faster consensus, and smaller state size. So really big advances in the performance and reduction in the cost of running this technology. The second sort of key interop in the protocol level is privacy. So we will be taking Tessera, which is the JP Morgan Private Transaction Manager, integrating it into Hyperledger Besu as well, so it works across both clients, and then taking some of the best features from Orion and moving it into Tessera. So that should benefit both existing Orion users by sort of giving them the robustness of the Tessera implementation, and should also benefit Tessera users by adding new features, including add and remove people from privacy groups, et cetera, et cetera. The privacy element, as Steve said, is really key to get right at the beginning and the offset of any blockchain journey, and it's something we invest heavily in. And the final bit at the protocol level is permissioning. So we're standardizing the permissioning approaches. Right now, there's sort of high overlap between our permissioning approaches, but they're just slightly different. The second key bit for interoperability is the plugin level. So it's not just enough that the components work with each other, but tooling, applications, et cetera, built on top of clients need to work across the clients. And so we're going to be standardizing the plugin APIs across the enterprise Ethereum clients. And so that moving forward, you can build once and work across all clients. And this is a pretty exciting bit of work, especially when I talked earlier about the innovation that's going on in the ecosystem. We're going to make sure these APIs are compatible with mainnet APIs. So all of the mainnet tooling works out of the box in enterprise Ethereum. And then the final bit that will probably get some people excited is interledger work. So we have line of sight in making ConsenSys Quorum compatible with value transfer and information transfer with non-Ethereum based networks, starting with Hyperledger Fabric, and that's on the roadmap as well. So a little bit more specifically in terms of timelines, I'm not going to get into all of this. You can review this on your own, but we've sequenced out this work. As you see on here, the BFT interop, the privacy interop are coming pretty quickly in Q1. The optimizations will take a bit more time. The integrated API and common plugin framework we expect to be done by Q3. And so by Q3 2021 is when we expect the full interoperability between Hyperledger Besu and Go Quorum. And then the final thing I'll say very quickly is that coming this November, which remarkably is only in a couple of days, November, but coming in November, we'll be releasing both the RC and the general release of a ConsenSys Quorum bundle. So you can, with one click, deploy all the jar files or all the scripts you need to run all the blockchain capabilities, either in development or in production. So stay tuned for that. You can sign up to get notified when the release happens at the ConsenSys Quorum website, which is consensus.net/quorum. And I hope you will all use that, give us feedback, and make sure your requirements are put on our roadmap.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the extensive presentation. And actually, we have some very interesting questions in the Q&A, and I will start with one. It's kind of a joke here internally, but do you think Quorum will be the last name after Pegasus, Hyperledger Besu, or do you plan another thing?
We love names. No, so for those that don't know the history, when we contributed our clients to the Hyperledger Foundation, they require that you give it a new name. So it used to be called Pantheon. It became Hyperledger Besu. Hyperledger Besu as a name will continue on, exist. It is our mainnet client. ConsenSys Quorum is the enterprise Ethereum bundle. So you can think of Hyperledger Fabric is the IBM blockchain, as Hyperledger Besu is to ConsenSys Quorum. The names won't be changing from now on. We're convinced.
Okay, it was just a joke. And yeah, we have a question on Teku, if I pronounce it correctly. Hello, is Teku the ETH2 enterprise clients? What are the enterprise features?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So there are three main ETH2 clients right now. There's Lighthouse by Sigma Prime, there's Prismatics Labs Prism client, and then there's our Teku client. They all have slightly different audiences in mind. And so we've built ours with institutional investors in mind. So the main thing you're going to do with an Ethereum 2.0 client today is stake your assets. And so I'd say hackers or enthusiasts have different requirements on what they need to stake versus institutions. Our ETH2 client has uptime guarantees, sort of HADR guarantees. It has a lot of signing integrations and integrations with HSM and certain different key management solutions, making it really a reliable choice for any institution that wants to build on this technology. So I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say publicly, but like the major institutions you would expect getting involved in these two are building on Teku, working closely with us, giving us feedback. And then also ConsenSys has a staking as a service solution that will go live with the Ethereum 2.0 launch that's based on Teku, so that it exposes those enterprise grade guarantees to users who want to get involved.
All right, thanks a lot for the reply. And I have another question for both of you, actually. Questions for Steve and Dan, and how will private blockchains merge with mainnet in the future? Straightforward question.
So, I mean, I'll jump in first. I'm very curious to Steve's answer first. ConsenSys really believes in the convergence of private and public blockchains. And when we say convergence, we mean that they'll move more close together. I think there will always be use cases where you want a consortia network spun up, where you want private chains, but in the long run, it's cheaper and more efficient to run on shared infrastructure, which fundamentally is what public mainnet is. And data is more valuable when it's connected. So the silos of private blockchain will get connected. The data will get unlocked. Value transfer, information transfer will unlock new use cases like connecting to mainnet. I think that vision is a multi-year vision. Right? This isn't going to happen overnight. We need to both improve the technology on the mainnet side, scalability, ease of use, et cetera, but we also need to improve the regulatory frameworks, the custodial frameworks, the certainties that enterprises will require before they start moving some of their key assets onto that playground.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Steve?
Yeah. So I guess we could do a whole hour on this topic, right?
Yeah.
I think so step back, sort of high level first principles. One, it logically makes sense, right? They both private blockchains and the mainnet could work together quite well. So I think we've seen that logically for a while. I think the community started in very different places, and one way you could interpret the events like ETH2 is that they are quite evolving, together, quite in an interesting way, right? And so you see, how you could call them side chains, you could call them, private chains, and how networks may interoperate and connect to one another. We certainly see that coming down the pike. I think when is a great question, and I think then you're really getting into opinion land. The space is just evolving too quickly to really say. But I will wrap up and say that is one thing that's just really exciting about the Ethereum ecosystem that's just not quite there in other ecosystems. You have genuine enterprise adoption, and you have a huge robust set of users on the mainnet side. And so while I can't tell you exactly when, I can tell you that Ethereum's going to be at the forefront of when that does happen. Okay, Dan, thanks for your view on this. And I would like just to come back on something that was on Steve's presentation related to COVID and acceleration of digitalization. We are seeing the same here in Thailand. Just to give you some feedback, during COVID, there was this kind of panic. And now we are seeing companies actually accelerating their digitalizations and requesting blockchains more than ever. I would like to have, of course, you mentioned it already, Steve, but I would like to expand a bit on this for our audience and see that the blockchain adoption for enterprises is actually increasing in your area as well. Yeah, was that a question over to me?
Yeah, it was a question on,
Sure.
on seeing, do you see it actually accelerating as well?
Absolutely. You know, I think they're almost where you could almost divide blockchain projects into two buckets. The really science experiment type that we're just probably never going to go anywhere, and then the promising ones that are solving a real business problem. And so what we're really seeing is a bifurcation of where the budget to build toys and science experiments has gone away, and that's good, right? That's a good thing, I think. But the focus on getting disruptive, innovations to the business has never been greater. And so I think what we're seeing is a lot of companies willing to rethink their approach in that second bucket of how can we really move quickly in the blockchain space. And so we're starting to think and talk about a Gen 2 approach, which is not to be confused with ETH2. It's more of a mindset on the enterprise side of what can we learn from some of these projects that went first and spent, by the way, $30-40 million, right, trying to solve a specific business problem, and potentially aren't even live yet, right? And how can we do things? Where's the order of magnitude improvement in efficiency, in speed, and in scale? And so those sorts of topics we're talking about on an ongoing basis. The good news is there are solutions, and the ecosystem has moved that much forward. There are these order of magnitude, both hardened patterns and techniques that you can use in best practices. And governance is a lot more understood, and there are tools that are available. The open source, technologies are a lot more hardened and proven. And so, what I would recommend to, if you're listening, you're saying, well, how do I tap into all that? I would say reach out to a partner like Atato, who's been around for all of these years and who's lived that curve along with the rest of us, because that can make all the difference.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Steve. And I will finish with Dan on the same kind of question. We had Joe this morning talking about it. We had a panel on enterprises with as well ConsenSys people, all seeing the same, but just your personal opinion about it. Dan?
About what?
Enterprise adoptions and an increasing interest about product.
Yeah, absolutely. So even with COVID, the reports we're seeing predict that the market will grow for enterprise blockchains 40 to 60% next year. It's one of the fastest growing markets for enterprise IT. And I think the reasons are pretty clear. As Steve said, we're starting to have established patterns, quicker times to market, sort of enabling enterprises to see value from their investment much sooner. The challenges on enterprise blockchain still remain the same, though, which is the main value comes when you have a lot of enterprises in the same space, often that are used to competing with each other, playing nicely together to unlock new value. So that can still take time, not from a technology side, but from, as Steve mentioned, a governance perspective or a consortia building perspective. And so that's something I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, how to accelerate, how to form these better, how to move more quickly. The big successes we've seen are when a large player in the space will spearhead a technology. So a good example in the US, you have USAA and State Farm working together on an insurance project. And if it stays just the two of them, is interesting, but probably not super important. But their hope next year is to then prove out to the rest of the insurance industry the value and get some of the other major providers on board. And that's the sort of model that we see will sort of unlock additional value and use cases in the years to come.
Okay, thanks a lot. And yeah, one last note on this one, and then we will conclude this event. And it's been a whole day full of panels, and I would like just for you to make a recommendation if people wants to learn about Quorum, if people wants to learn about Kaleido, how should they do it, and what kind of resources they can use.
So
looks like Dan's got his URL posted
yes,
there.
already I was first one on to send to the panelists, so you can directly go on ConsenSys website and jump in on Quorum. If you have any questions, you can come to us as well. We're always happy to bring some training, anything like that for any companies looking at Quorum. Same for Kaleido, Abby. And Steve, you want one last point?
Yeah, Kaleido.io, if you're a visual learner, our YouTube channel, we've got more content than you could ever go through.
Definitely.
And if you want to talk to us, you can find me on LinkedIn, or Atato is also a really good option to start the conversation.
Thank you very much. And yeah, it's the conclusion of our ETHBKK event. And it was great. As I mentioned, we had more than 370 people signing up on different platforms and joining on different panels. And we are really happy to, yeah, can you hear me? We are really happy to have you all. And we really would like to thank you, both of you, for joining these last sessions. We really appreciate both ConsenSys and Kaleido's support at Atato. We are really big believers of your two products. And thanks again for all the attendees. I hope that today you learned something. And if you need anything, we are here to help the tech community getting in with blockchain. And thank you very much all. We will conclude on these notes. And yeah, that's it from there. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you all.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.